were to summarize my Pinterest board in a couple of words, fun, girly. I have just hit a brick wall, and it's a very classic brick wall that I really should have thought about. What's up, Divas, and welcome back to another video. My name is Priscilla. I'm a Nigerian women's wear designer based in the UK. So I've been seeing this sewing my Pinterest board trend all over my YouTube homepage, and I was like, hello, I make garments. I have a Pinterest board. I have many Pinterest boards, and there are some pins that have been on my boards over the last months or years that I've been wanting to make, and I thought this would make like an amazing series. So in this video, I'm going to be attempting to make a few pieces, maybe one, maybe two. You guys will have to watch to find out and see. But quick outfit of the day, I'm wearing this halter neck. Will you call it halter neck? That's the best way to describe it. It's a halter neck dress. So this dress I actually made from the book So Simple by Tammy, and it's a book that has 20 projects. It comes with the patterns. I think that's the best thing about this book, and I just dived right in. She sent a copy to me, and I've been having fun playing around with the projects. This is the first mix of the many projects in the book. It's relatively beginner friendly. This is not sponsored, by the way. I just thought to shout out the book for anyone who likes making clothing and you wanted to make some cute pieces for the summer. I would highly recommend this book. I'm going to leave the link down below if you wanted to grab a copy for yourself. But let's get back into the agenda for the day. I'm going to be sewing an item from my Pinterest board. And if we were to summarize my Pinterest board in a couple of words, it's very fun, it's very girly. I'm also discovering that I like pieces that have, it's kind of like smart, but soft and feminine. I think that's the best way to describe it. So like a smart, like work type dress, but with a playful collar, something like that, or a collar that looks like this. I've discovered I've been pinning a lot of those dress styles. I have nowhere to wear them to. I think that's why I've not made any just yet. But so the first project I'm thinking about tackling is this. I don't even know how would you describe this dress. This dress has been on my Pinterest board for, I would say, at least a year. I remember seeing this the year I got pregnant. So not last year, the year before. And I knew I wanted to make this dress. I just like, you know, when the style just slips through the cracks. I saw it again recently and I was like, okay, I really need to make this dress. It keeps making the rounds on my Pinterest. And then I saw it. So it's like a kimono dress that has a fitted waistline. It's loose on top, loose at the bottom, so it kind of flares out from the waist, and there is this kind of like waistband detail that cinches in, and I'm just like, okay, we need to make this dress. I've also seen people attempt the same dress style as like a different tutorial, so there are a few ways I could actually make this, but I'm going to try and do this intuitively, which is essentially just analyze the dress from the front, the back, whatever pictures I see. I don't know who the original designer is. If I knew, I'd actually tell you, and make a version that works for me and that won't be too complicated to make as a tutorial, because that's important as well. So let me show you guys the fabric options I actually have in mind for this project. Fabric options. I have two options that I'm leaning towards. One is this cream lace. Let me show you what the pattern looks like. I got this fabric 6 months ago. Have you guys seen that reel I made where I said you get new fabric and you're excited that you're going to mix up to with it, but 6 months later you've not still used it? That is this fabric here. I got this fabric either December last year or January this year, and this is June. I've still not used it. So this is one fabric option. This I would need to add lining, but I thought it would be great for the summer because it has this beautiful like leaf embroidery on the cream net, which is actually quite nice. So that would work really well if I were to use maybe a colored lining underneath. I think it would pair for like a beautiful dress. I have 2 meters, which I think would be enough for this style. Option number 2 is a fabric that if you've watched me long enough, you know I am obsessed with brocade, jacquard, any fabric that when the threads are woven, it creates patterns and textures. I love. So this one, I don't know. If I'm being honest, I'm leaning more towards this one because this is quite festive. It's like a mixture of gold and blue, and I have 2 yards or 2 meters, and I think I'll be able to make like a mini slash knee length version of the dress. It's one of those styles I think I want to make it in such a way that I can wear it as a mini dress for like a really nice event, or I can wear it with like trouser underneath if it's a day that I know I'm going to be bending over and I don't want to be conscious of my underwear showing. Personally, this is more me if I'm being really honest, so I'm going to be using this, and it's great because it doesn't need any lining. So let's get straight into the making. To make it easy to follow along this tutorial, I have divided this video into chapters. So the design plan, the pattern making, the cutting and the sewing, so it's easy for you to watch and follow at your pace, as well as rewatch any section that you need clarity on. So I'm going to start off with the design plan, and I've been enjoying just like drawing this like digital rough sketch before going ahead to make the pattern. So the plan I have in mind is to sort of like draft a half bodice and add a dart, but that dart I'm going to be getting rid of. Then I'm going to be extending that bodice slash dress pattern sideways and dividing it into 2 panels. The mid panel is going to be straight, and then the side panel is going to have that kimono effect. To cinch in the waist, I'm going to be making a separate belt pattern, and these are the measurements I'm going to be working with. Please work with yours for the absolute best fit, like I always say, because you are going to be the one wearing the garment. Starting off with the front plan, this is what's going to set the tone for the rest of the patterns. Starting with a long vertical line on the far left of this big pattern paper, I'm going to be marking the neck drop or front neckline depth of 8 inches from the top edge. The width of the front neckline is 3 inches because I wanted it to be nice and rounded along that edge. Now the neckline itself is V-shaped, like a rounded V-shape that looks like this. And I plan to actually extend the pattern sideways, so the bodice or the dress and the sleeve are kind of like one piece. So from the shoulder point, I'm drawing a slanted line that goes sideways like this, and the sleeve length, which is just goes from the shoulder point sideways, is 25 inches. This is enough width to add that kimono effect to the dress. Next, I'm marking the vertical distance from my shoulder to my bust. Mine is 10 inches. Please work with yours for a better fit or the best fit. And then I'm marking the vertical distance from my bust to my waist. Mine is 6 inches. And then the vertical distance from my waist to my hip of roughly 10 inches. Along these points, I'm going to be drawing horizontal lines. These lines are going to guide me to add my dart and to divide the pattern piece into the 2 panels that this style has. Once I have the horizontal line for the bust, the waist and the hip, I'm going to be going to the bust line and marking half of my nipple to nipple measurement, because along that point is when I'm going to be drawing the dividing line for this pattern piece. So I'm going to be drawing the vertical line that kind of cuts through that half nipple to nipple point, and this line is going to go through the bust, the waist, the hip, all the way down to the hemline eventually. Now coming to the waistline, I'm going to be marking my dart of 1 inch, so half an inch on both sides of that nipple, like half nipple line that I drew, and then I want my dart to end 1 inch below my bust line. So I'm drawing the typical dart shape that looks like a triangle, so it goes from the waist up to the bust, and then it's going to go down to the hip like this. This is going to just help to shape the dress along the waistline really well. So here I'm just going in to extend the vertical line upwards to the shoulder point and then downwards eventually to the hemline, because that way I have a full division happening. Now my dress length is 31 inches, so it's kind of like a mini dress, so you can wear it as a shirt dress or as a mini dress if I wanted. However, this style would look really cool as a full maxi boo-boo. It didn't occur to me until afterwards, plus I didn't even have the fabric. So if you have enough material, I'll say about 5-6 meters, you can make a full-on boo-boo for this style. Next up, I am going in to draw the side seam. So the side seam is essentially a straight line that goes from the top shoulder point where I mark my sleeve length down to the hem. And for the hemline, you can have it straight, or you can do this like curved edge that goes downwards towards the side. I just need to add something extra along the hem of the dress. So rather than have it as a straight hem, I have it curved down sideways and connect to the side seam of my dress. So with that, I have my 2 panels. There was not real need to draw in the real curved side seam of like bust, waist and hip, because the dress is essentially just like a straightish shape, and then the belt is what gives it the definition along the waistline. Next up, I'm tracing all the different panels I need. So starting off with that mid front panel, I'm tracing this onto another pattern paper, and I'm not including that dart in the middle because that is going to become a seam. I'm adding 1 centimeter seam allowance around my pattern, transferring my notches, as well as a 2 centimeter or 1 inch hemline allowance to allow me finish up the dress. I'm going to be adding grain line annotations, and then I'm going to be marking where I want my belt to sit. So I want my belt to sit 15 inches below my shoulder point. And once I have this marked here, I know I can add a notch at those points, which would guide me when I'm connecting this panel to the next one, and also when it's time for me to stitch the belt into this particular seam. So with a tracing wheel, I'm just transferring that point onto the plan at the bottom, so when I create the belt as well as the other piece that goes to the side, I have that notch that would help me to connect everything in place. So this is the first pattern piece for the front, all drawn, cut out and ready to cut onto my fabric. The next pattern piece I'm going to create or work on is the back plan, and for this I'm going to be marking the back neckline depth of 1.5 inches from the very top corner, because the back neckline I want it to be higher and then the front can have the V neckline that I had already planned earlier on. I'm just using a red pen so that guides me and knows, and I know like which one is for the front or which one is for the back. So essentially the back is the neckline that I just drew earlier on. It's a straight center back edge that I'm going to be adding seam allowance to because I want the center back to have a zip. The dart is going to be the same. The middle seam where the belt is going to be the same. And I'm just going in here to draw in that neckline and add my 1 centimeter seam allowance around the pattern, as well as the 2 cm hem allowance that would help me finish up the hemline of the dress. So this is the center back or mid back piece that I'm going to be using to cut my fabric. Once I have that mid front and mid back done, I know that sort of like wide side piece I can use for the front and the back. However, before I cut that out, I'm going to be using it to plan my facing. So I want my facing to be 5 inches wide along the shoulder and 5 inches deep along the neckline on the front. So it's going to be like a triangular shaped facing. You can have yours rounded or squared off if you like. I just wanted something relatively straightforward to work with. So I'm going to be tracing off the facing for the front and the facing for the back. The one for the front is going to have the V neckline, so it can finish up the neckline of the front. Then I'm going to create another facing piece that would have the high neckline for the back. It's going to be the same along the shoulder and along the red line that sits like this for the front and the back. But it's important to just note that with facings, you want to have your back facing pattern different from the front because they need to be joined together along the shoulder seam, as well as match the neckline of your garment on the front and the back. So this is the front facing all done with grain line, seam allowance all included. I'm going to grab another pattern piece and trace off the back facing for this design. With the back facing all traced off, seam allowance and everything included in there, I know I can cut out the pattern piece ready to, cut my fabric and help to finish the neckline of my dress. This I'm going to be cutting 2 pieces for, one for the left and one for the right. So with all those patterns traced off, I know I can go in and make further changes to this plan. So for this plan, I want to retain the side that goes towards this outer edge on the right. So I'm just adding seam allowance around the pattern and cutting it out like this, because I've already traced off what I need for those middle sections for the front, the back, as well as the facings. This piece I can use to cut the front and the back. I also transferred the notch that would guide me when it's time to sew in my belt. For the belt pattern itself, I have this piece of paper here that I folded in half because I want to plan the pattern like on a fold. And I want the shape of the belt to kind of be slim along the sides and then wider along the middle. And the belt length itself is your waist measurement minus the mid panel measurement for the front and the back. So say your waist is 30 inches, you would remove whatever that middle front panel is, as well as the dimension for the back. So if the middle panel is 5 inches, you would multiply that by 2 because we planned the pattern on a fold. You take that away from your waist measurement and then you remove the same for the back to get the length for your belt. So I'm just going in here to mark half of that length as well as the belt width along the side of 3 inches. And then I'm going to be drawing in a straightish line on this like folded edge. And then I'm going to curve it out so it's a shape that kind of is narrower at the middle and then it flares out towards the side. So for the side width, I went with 5 inches. And that way I am marking 2 inch on both sides along this outer line I just drew here, and then I'm going to be connecting it back to the 3-inch line that I drew earlier on. This way I know I'm planning and cutting the pattern symmetrically. If you want to do this by hand, you can also do so. If you want to have your belt straight to make your life easier, you can do so. If you want to have the belt even slimmer or wider, there is the option to make all those adjustments to your liking and preference. So this is the shape of the belt. I went ahead to add seam allowance around the pattern, grain line annotation, then I'm going to cut it out. And once I open it up, I have my full belt piece like this, which I'll be using to cut my fabric. I just wanted an interesting shape rather than just having the belt straight. Ignore how crazy I look, but I have just hit a brick wall, and it's a very classic brick wall that I really should have thought about. I have prepared all the patterns for the piece, but I don't have enough fabric. I only have 2 meters, and I thought it was going to be enough to at least cut the main, white piece that's kind of like the sleeve, and then the piece that sits on the middle front and the middle back, but I don't have enough fabric. I'm not about to go into London to buy the same fabric, so I need to think of a solution quick. What I could do, I've just put my thinking cap on, so I could technically buy a simple cotton or even denim in this shade of blue, and I think that would make a beautiful contrast, even though it's not intentional. But I think the contrast of this as the main side piece that's going to be gathered into the belt would make a beautiful pairing.
One eternity later.
It's a few days after, and I was able to successfully source a nice blue cotton. It's like this shade of blue. And I think it picks up from one of the blue hues on the fabric because it's like this kind of navy blue, even though I was torn between getting more royal blue and this navy, but I think either would have worked really well. So I have a meter here, and my plan is to actually use this navy blue, the plain one, to cut the middle on the front and the middle on the back. I think that contrast would make the dress even cooler, and then use the same plain navy to cut the waistband. So the waistband is actually very visible, whereas if the waistband was in the same color, you will see the cinching in happening on the waist, but I think it will not be as striking. So I'm going to cut out the dress. I also got some invisible zip because that's how I'm going to get in and out of the dress, and I got it in the same shade of blue, a nice long one, because I just want the zip to go from the neck all the way down, so I don't have to think of how I'm going to get into the dress, as well as some fusible interfacing for the facing on the front and on the back, so the neckline is really nice and clean. So let's cut this dress, let's make this dress. Using the pattern pieces I made earlier on, I'm cutting out the panels for the dress, so the main kimono-esque side of the dress is going to be in this fabric, and I have marked an 11 inches wide opening for the arm on the top edge on the side, and then I use the plain blue cotton that I got to cut the the middle section on the front, the back, the facing, which I have fused with some fusible interfacing to just give it shape and hold, as well as the belt pieces. The belt I cut a pair for each side, so it actually stays nice and smooth, and it really cinches in the waistline of this dress. So this is the main part of the dress, and I have 2 pairs, 1 pair for each side, and all those pieces cut, I'm going to dive right into sewing. The first thing I'm going to do is essentially just overlock the pieces around the edges, especially around the edges where the belt is going to sit and the outer edge where the arm is going to come out from, because once it's overlocked, the finishing is a lot easier to do. If you don't want to overlock, French seaming is another option, or using bias tape or a zigzag stitch could possibly work. For the front, I'm connecting the panels in such a way that I leave the opening for the belts on both sides. I leave it open so that I can sew my belt in later on. So I'm just sewing in the plain blue panel to the brocade or jacquard pieces for my front. And once I have that stitched, because I've already overlocked the edges, I can set that aside to go ahead to attach my zip on the center back edge. So this zip is actually a dress zip. I thought it was an invisible zip. Excuse me, please use an invisible zip for a much cleaner finish. But I'm going to be sewing this on the center back edge of my piece. So I'm pinning in the zip in this way, the zip tape open, so it's a lot easier for me to stitch everything together. So I'm going to be sewing up the zip tape on the center back edges, and afterwards go ahead to stitch the bottom edge where the zip actually sits, to stitch it up close so I have it ready to be joined to the side panel or the brocade pieces for the back of this dress. After closing up the seam on the bottom center back edge where my zip is, I gave my piece a press, and this is what it looks like. I'm going to go ahead to connect these seams, leaving the edge or the portion where my belt is going to sit. Because I already notched this from the pattern, I just put some pins there as a reminder and indicator for when I'm sewing. So I'm going to be sewing up both sides to this middle section that has a zip for the back of the dress. Because everything has been overlocked, it just makes my life a lot easier, and I don't have to think about how I'm going to finish this seam after I've attached my belt. So this is what the back and the front of the dress is looking like. I'm just putting right sides together at this point. You can give your piece a press before you actually do this. It would make the whole finishing later on a lot easier. But once the right sides are facing each other, I'm going to be sewing up the shoulder seam on the left and on the right hand side, as well as the side seam, leaving that arm opening of 11 inches because you need to have somewhere that your arm would come out from. So the seams are all stitched up on the side and on the shoulder, and I've just folded in that arm opening that I left earlier on. I'm just folded it over by about 1 centimeter, and that I'm going to be stitching in such a way that I have a very nice folded edge for the portion where my arms are going to be coming out from on the side of the dress. This is one great way that you can just do like a simple sleeve opening if you don't want to have any type of facing or use bias tape. It's one technique, but this only works if you overlock the edges, because once they're overlocked, you can just go back in, fold it against itself, and then stitch it down to finish up that edge of the sleeve. So moving on to sewing the belt, which is going to help us cinch in the waistline of this dress. I have my belt pieces already fused with interfacing, and I'm going to be putting right sides facing each other and sewing the top and bottom curved edges, because once that is all stitched up, I can turn it inside out, give it a press to have this clean, beautiful belt that is going to help me define the waistline of this dress. So I'm going to do this for both sides, so the belt that will go on the left and the belt that will go on the right, and I have both belt pieces all done. This I'm going to actually take onto the dress now. And because I left that opening for the left and the right hand side on the front as well on the back, I know I can just insert the belt like this and stitch it in a way that it would go into this seam very nicely on the front and on the back, which will now create, you know, the effect that this dress has. So it's kind of like a batwing dress with a belt insert. That's the best way to describe this style. It's also a clever way to just make like a boo-boo more trendy and more defined on the waist by adding this belt detail. So once that has been pinned in place, I'm going to take it to my machine and stitch the belt into this seam that I left for this detail to be added to the design. There is so much I want to change. Where do I even begin? So I definitely think the waistband can be a lot tighter. Like, we need snatch. This is not snatching at all. It needs to be like that tight. I didn't make it big intentionally, so I added like 2 inches in there, which I know I'm going to be taking out. Then I feel like it should definitely be a bit higher. So maybe like 1 to 1.5 inch higher, so it kind of sits here. Thankfully, I've not overlooked this seam, so I'm just going to unpick that and fix it. So move this inwards by 2 inches on each side and then lift it up by 1.5 inch. I think that would fix the fact that it just looks like a sack of potato. We are not going for that. That's not the look we're aiming for. I love the volume of the sleeve here, and I can actually lift up my arm. It does make it a bit short as I lift up my arm because the sleeve is connected to the bodice. So if you want to ensure your modesty is protected, you want to aim for a length that is a lot longer. So even after you lift up your hands, the dress is still under your butt. But this is cute. This is definitely cute. It just needs some tweaks to ensure that it is, you know, the way it's meant to be, and then up just a little bit. So I'm going to fix those before attaching the facing and then finishing up the hem. The zip is already in, but I think it just needs like that. This waistband just needs to be sorted. So let me sort that real quick.
A few moments later.
I mean, doesn't it look so much better already? I am glad I did the fitting to just check. So I made the change of moving the belt inwards even more. So keep the belt measurement the way I described earlier on. Don't add anything extra. You want it to be nice and tight around your waist for the definition to really happen. The final step in the assembly process is basically to join the facing pieces together. So I'm putting right sides of the front and back facings, and I'm going to be sewing up the shoulder seam, leaving the center back edge open. So once that is all stitched, I went ahead to overlock the seam as well as the bottom edges of the facing, because this is how I'm going to be finishing the neckline of the dress. So I'm going to be putting right sides of the facing all joined together to right sides of the dress along the neckline. So with one continuous stitch, I can sew from one center back edge around the neckline on the front, the back, and make my way to the other side of the back of the dress. This is also how I'm going to be finishing that top edge of my zip as well, because the facing just makes for a very beautiful option of finishing necklines. So once I'm done stitching the center back edge, I turn the piece towards the neckline, stitch my way all around from the back neckline to the front, and then back around to the other side on the back of the dress. I mean, look at how lovely and neat the neckline is. There's an option to go in and do like an edge stitch on the inside that kind of holds the facing down and flat, but after finishing up the facing, I went off to fold and sew the hemline of the dress after overlocking it, and that is the final step of creating this dress. This is how it turned out. I got so many compliments. Oh my god, the day I wore this dress out, like at least 2 people stopped me and said, your dress looks really, really cool. And the design is not even super complicated. From you looking at it, it looks complex, but it's just a clever detail and a clever design in my opinion. So I hope you guys enjoyed watching this sewing my Pinterest board video. Let me know if you're going to be recreating this. Give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video, and if you guys would like to see more projects in this series, we'll make that happen in the future. And until next time, have a good morning, afternoon, and evening wherever you are. Bye.